the greatest legal casino heist in history.
Maybe the WPT is to start beheading people that cheat.
I mean, obviously it's unacceptable, right, to cheat somebody. Right, it's like, that's unacceptable.
August 2012. A man walks into one of London's most exclusive casinos, carrying $1 million in cash. The staff recognize him instantly. He's Phil Ivey, a gambling legend, one of the greatest poker players of all time. He's won millions across the world, and now he's here to do it again. The casino rolls out the red carpet, private room, VIP treatment. Any request he makes, they grant. A Mandarin-speaking dealer, a specific type of playing cards, an automatic shuffler. No questions asked. To them, he's just another high roller looking for a thrill. But Phil Ivey isn't here for the rush. He's here to pull off something much bigger. Because what the casino doesn't realize is that they've just handed him everything he needs to rob them blind. Over the next 48 hours, Ivey and his mysterious partner, Kelly's son, will execute the most brilliant legal casino heist of all time, without ever touching a single card. No hacking, no collusion, no cheating. Just a microscopic flaw in how the cards were printed. A flaw so subtle that even the casino itself didn't notice. And what they really don't know? For the past 9 months, Ivey and Son have been using this exact same strategy to drain casinos across the world for over $20 million. The best part? It was all completely legal. This is the story of the greatest legal casino heist in history. Now, if there's one thing Phil Ivey's story proves, it's that the biggest scams are the ones you never see coming. The casinos thought they were in control, but in reality, they were the ones being played. And that's exactly how online criminals operate, preying on blind spots you didn't even know existed. That's why this video is sponsored by Aura, the all-in-one digital security solution that protects you from hackers, identity thieves, and financial fraud before it's too late. Most people don't realize it, but your personal information is probably already being sold on the dark web. Your passwords, credit card numbers, even your home address, exposed. And the worst part? You won't know it's happening until it's too late. Aura scans the dark web 24/7, constantly monitoring billions of data points to alert you in real time if your identity is at risk. It automatically locks your credit, stops criminals from opening accounts in your name, and even blocks scam calls and robocallers before they reach you. Hackers only need one weak point to drain your bank account or steal your identity, so don't give them the chance. Click the link in the description or go to aura.com/overnightmillionaire to start your 14-day trial with Aura. Try it out, see the difference for yourself, and protect what matters most before it's too late. By trying Aura, you'll lose nothing, but without protection, you could lose everything. Now, back to the story, because what happens next changed the casino industry forever. Phil Ivey wasn't just another poker player. He was a legend, a name whispered with respect and fear in gambling circles. With 10 World Series of Poker bracelets, over $30 million in tournament winnings, and a reputation as one of the greatest minds the game had ever seen, he had built a career on reading opponents like an open book. Unlike most players, Ivey didn't rely on luck. He controlled the table. His expression never wavered. His movements were calculated, and his instincts were sharper than anyone else's. But even legends face limits. Poker was changing. For years, online games had been a goldmine for professionals, allowing them to grind out millions against weaker opponents. Then, in 2011, the US government shut it all down overnight. Black Friday, as it became known, froze millions of dollars in player funds and effectively ended the online poker boom. Sponsorships dried up, and the once endless stream of cash started to slow. Ivey was still one of the best in the world, but the easy money was gone. He needed a new edge. On the other side of the world, Kelly's son had spent her life inside casinos, but not as a professional. She was a high roller, the kind of gambler casinos drooled over. Her father was a wealthy businessman in China, and money had never been a concern. She didn't just visit casinos, she was their VIP. Private jets, 5-star suites, unlimited credit lines, anything she wanted was handed to her on a silver platter. Casinos weren't afraid to let her play because they knew how this story always ended. High rollers like her didn't beat the house. They lost, and they lost big. And she did, until she lost too much. One particularly bad streak drained her bankroll. She wasn't worried at first. Like many gamblers, she borrowed from the casino to keep playing. It was a routine move, something she had done before. But this time, she lent some of the borrowed money to a friend. That friend swore they'd pay it back. They didn't. Sun didn't realize the gravity of her mistake until she was at the airport, ready to leave the country. She never made it to the gate. She was arrested on the spot. In Las Vegas, defaulting on a casino marker isn't just debt. It's fraud. It didn't matter that she had the means to pay. The casino didn't care. She was thrown into jail for 3 weeks, much of it spent in solitary confinement. It was in that tiny, empty cell where everything changed. She had nothing, no TV, no books, just a deck of playing cards to pass the time. Hours blurred together as she shuffled the cards over and over. That's when she noticed something strange. The backs of the cards weren't perfectly symmetrical. The patterns were slightly off-center, cut just a fraction of an inch differently from one card to the next. It was almost imperceptible, but once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. This wasn't just a printing defect. This was a flaw in the entire casino industry, one they didn't even realize existed. By paying attention to these imperfections, she could tell which cards were which without ever seeing their faces. The implications were massive. If this flaw was consistent across casino decks, it meant she could know which cards were high value and which were low value. She could turn a game of pure chance into one of skill. She could beat the house. When she was released, she wasted no time testing her theory. It worked. She was able to win. But there was a problem. She wasn't a high roller anymore. She didn't have the clout to make casinos change the way they dealt cards or let her dictate the rules of the game. Her discovery was powerful, but it needed the right player to use it to its full potential. That's when she met Phil Ivey. Ivey wasn't just a skilled gambler. He had something even more valuable: reputation. Casinos wanted him at their tables. He was known for betting millions in a single night, playing recklessly, and taking insane risks. If he made special requests at a table, the casino would listen. He was one of the few people in the world who could sit down at the high-stakes baccarat tables, make strange demands, and have the staff go along with it. And that was the missing piece of the puzzle. Sun had the strategy. Ivey had the access. Together, they weren't just going to win, they were going to take the casinos for millions. The flaw Sun had discovered was invisible to most players. Casino playing cards weren't cut symmetrically, meaning that if you knew what to look for, you could tell certain cards apart just by their edges. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't tampering. It was simply noticing something that no one else saw. But knowing about the flaw wasn't enough. They needed to manipulate the deck without ever touching it. And to do that, they needed the casino itself to help them. Casinos thrive on superstition. High rollers from Macau and China are notorious for their rituals and lucky habits, blowing on dice, refusing to touch certain numbers, even demanding entire decks of cards be swapped out because they feel off. To the untrained eye, this might seem strange. To a casino, it's business as usual. So when Phil Ivey and Kelly's son sat down at the baccarat table, they didn't act like strategists. They acted like high rollers with eccentric superstitions. Their first request was simple: a Mandarin-speaking dealer. This wasn't unusual for an international high roller like Ivey, and it ensured that Sun could communicate with the dealer without the casino staff realizing what was really happening. Then came the most important request: having certain cards rotated 180 degrees for good luck. In Baccarat, players aren't allowed to touch the cards themselves, but they can ask the dealer to turn them over in a specific way, a common superstition in Asian gambling culture. So, whenever a 6, 7, 8, or 9 appeared, all strong cards in Baccarat, Sun instructed the dealer to flip it. To the dealer, this was nothing more than an odd habit. To Ivey and Sun, it was a precision-based system, because once the high-valued cards were rotated, they had sorted the deck. But there was one more piece to the puzzle. Normally, a casino dealer manually shuffles the cards between hands. This could have ruined their entire system. One accidental rotation and the deck would become useless. So Ivey made a perfectly reasonable request. They wanted to use an automatic shuffler. Unlike a human dealer, an automatic shuffler only mixes the order of the cards. It never changes their orientation, which meant that once the deck was edge-sorted, it stayed edge-sorted. At this point, Ivey and Sun weren't just playing Baccarat, they were running a casino cheat code in real time. Once the deck was sorted, Ivey already knew which hands would be strong and which ones wouldn't. If a high-valued card was next in the shoe, he would bet the maximum. If it was a low-value card, he would bet the minimum. The casino had no idea. They had catered to Ivey's every request, completely unaware that they had just destroyed their own house edge. For 9 months, Ivey and Sun traveled the world, winning millions at casinos in Las Vegas, Macau, Atlantic City, and Singapore. Everywhere they went, the routine was the same. Find a casino willing to cater to a high roller, play the superstition angle, sort the deck, and drain the house for millions. It was the closest thing to a perfect strategy that had ever existed. And then, in August 2012, they pulled off their biggest win yet. Crockfords Casino in London had seen some of the biggest gamblers in the world, but few had the reputation of Phil Ivey. When he walked through their doors with £1 million in cash, the casino was eager to keep him happy. They agreed to his requests: a Mandarin-speaking dealer, the rotation of lucky cards, an automatic shuffler. The system worked perfectly. Over the course of 2 nights, they won £7.7 million, around $12 million. And then, everything changed. When Ivey approached the cashier to collect his winnings, the casino didn't hand him a single dollar. Instead, they handed him a receipt. Crockfords had frozen his payout. They didn't have proof of cheating. The cards were clean. There were no marked cards, no collusion with the dealer, no electronic devices. But something about how he won didn't feel right, so they refused to pay. Ivey, furious, sued them for his winnings. But while he was fighting to claim his biggest payday, something even worse was happening. Other casinos had started to notice. One by one, gambling houses across the world began investigating their losses. And then, the Borgata Casino in Atlantic City made its move. Unlike Crockfords, they had already paid Ivey his winnings, $9.6 million over 4 sessions. Now, they wanted it back. Crockford's decision to refuse payment wasn't just a loss for Ivey. It was a warning sign. For months, Ivey and Sun had operated under the assumption that casinos would always honor their wins. But Crockford's had changed the game. Other casinos started looking into Ivey's past sessions. They analyzed his play, and they came to one conclusion. His wins weren't just high, they were impossible. The Borgata Casino in Atlantic City took action first. In April 2014, they filed a lawsuit against Ivey and Sun, accusing them of fraud and demanding full repayment. The case wasn't about traditional cheating. There were no marked decks, no hidden cameras, no collusion. Instead, the casino argued that Ivey had violated the spirit of the game. For the first time in his career, Ivey wasn't fighting other gamblers. He was fighting the legal system. His defense was simple. Edge sorting wasn't cheating. The casinos had agreed to every single condition. They had let him pick the dealer. They had rotated the cards. They had used the automatic shuffler. And now that they had lost, they wanted to change the rules. But even with that, the courts weren't convinced. By 2016, the UK High Court ruled against Ivey. His $12 million was gone forever. Later that year, a U.S. federal judge ruled against Ivey in the Borgata case, ordering him to repay the full $9.6 million. For years, Ivey fought the ruling, but by 2019, his options were running out. The Borgata began seizing his assets, filing motions to garnish his poker winnings and freeze his accounts. By that time, Ivey had left the U.S., relocating to Asia, where he continued playing high-stakes private games. But in July 2020, after 6 years of legal battles, Ivey and Borgata reached a settlement. The terms were never made public. But one thing was for certain: the perfect casino strategy had ended in disaster. For years, Phil Ivey was poker's golden boy. He wasn't just another high-stakes player. He was the best. The face of an industry built on skill, deception, and the unwavering belief that, against all odds, a gambler could win. But now, his legacy had a stain that wouldn't wash away. The Aria Casino in Las Vegas, once proud to have his name on their exclusive poker room, renamed it to Table 1. Casinos weren't just cutting ties. They were making an example out of him. They wanted to remind everyone they had won. And yet, despite everything, Ivey wasn't done. For a while, he disappeared from the spotlight, playing in private high-stakes games in Asia, far from the reach of U.S. courts. He kept a low profile, avoiding interviews, staying away from the poker circuit, and refusing to pay the millions he owed to the Borgata. But even after everything, the lawsuits, the bans, the losses, he never stopped being a gambler. And the poker world never stopped respecting him. After years in the shadows, Ivey returned to major tournaments, stepping back onto the scene as if nothing had happened. The lawsuits, the bans, the casino blacklists, none of it had affected his ability to win. Over the next few years, he racked up multiple high-stakes victories, proving that no courtroom battle, no legal fight, and no casino blacklist could take away what made him great. As for Kelly's son, she never stopped edge sorting. Even after everything, the lawsuits, the scrutiny, the headlines, casinos still let her play. She adapted. She kept traveling, kept finding ways to gain an edge, and even started training others in her technique. Her story became so infamous that Hollywood took notice. Her life rights were sold, and a movie about her exploits, The Baccarat Queen, went into production. She had spent years watching casinos manipulate high rollers, feeding them drinks, throwing them gifts, making them feel invincible before cleaning them out. Now, she had become the legend casinos whispered about. Phil Ivey and Kelly's son had exploited a flaw so small that even the casinos themselves didn't see it coming. But the house always adapts. Casinos around the world tightened their security, implementing new protocols to ensure that edge sorting would never work again. Borgata, once the crown jewel of Atlantic City, had grown even more powerful, now accounting for almost half the city's total gambling revenue. And Crockfords, the London casino where Ivey and Son had pulled off their biggest score, never got another chance. In 2023, it shut down permanently. A 200-year-old institution, gone. Ivey and Son had won the battle, but in the end, the house rewrote the rules to make sure it never happened again. For one brief moment, they had done the impossible. They had found a weakness in an unbeatable system and turned it into a fortune. And they never cheated. They never hacked the game. They simply made the casino beat itself. And when the industry couldn't stop them, it had to change its own rules just to keep up. Ivey may have lost the lawsuits, but in the eyes of gamblers everywhere, he had already won.